morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you so much for attending. My name is Gloria Dongara, and I am with AAA, the Auto Club Group in the Ponte Vedra office, and I also serve as chair of the St. Johns County Chamber of Commerce, the Ponte Vedra Division. Today's discussion is hosted by the Chamber's Ponte Vedra Division, and we are very happy that you have all joined us today. Before we begin, I would like to recognize the sponsor of today's event, Fields Auto Group. Fields Auto Group has been a longtime supporter of events for the Ponte Vedra Beach Division, and we are so grateful for their sponsorship of this virtual event. Fields Auto Group is family owned and operated and represents luxury auto brands. Its commitment to building long-term relationships has enabled Fields to grow to North America's premier luxury auto group. They specialize in ensuring that our customers get the right vehicle and packages, not only for their driving needs and budget, but for their lifestyle as well. I myself is a Fields customer, and I must say I love their service very, very much. So today we are very, very pleased to introduce Kevin Craig with AT&T. He is with us to discuss 5G. And I know myself, I have often thought, well, what is 5G exactly? So I'm very excited that he's going to be talking about this. Kevin Craig serves as Regional Director, Corporate External and Legislative Affairs for AT&T in North Florida. A Jacksonville native and proud Ponte Vedra High School graduate, Kevin is responsible for AT&T's primary corporate engagement and advocacy efforts with state and local elected officials, nonprofit organizations, and other business groups across 15 North Florida counties. Prior to joining AT&T, Kevin served as Director of Public Policy for the Central Florida Hotel and Lodging Association, CFHLA. Kevin's efforts in Tallahassee led to his 2019 recognition from Influence magazine as a rising star in Florida politics. AT&T is a member of the St. Johns County Chamber of Commerce, and Kevin holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Political Science from the University of Central Florida. Many of you have already submitted questions, but please feel free to submit questions in the chat box as we proceed with this presentation. And it is my honor to introduce Kevin Craig.
Well, thank you so much for that kind introduction. My first question is why AT&T couldn't have given me a shorter title, but I do appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to sharing a little bit with everyone today on 5G and what it means, not just for North Florida and our state, but also for the country, and a lot of exciting things to discuss. I'll be doing this Zoom presentation here at home on my AT&T internet, so it's going to be a little awkward if I have any connectivity issues. I might have to call Comcast tomorrow, but let's get underway if everyone's ready. So today I want to talk a little bit about new innovations, especially in wireless technology, and the way they're going to impact the way we live, our economy, and even public safety in the years to come. All over Florida, AT&T is working to bring businesses the latest technologies to support and build their businesses. We'll go ahead to the next slide. In the last 3 years, AT&T has invested nearly $3.2 billion in our wired and wireless networks here in Florida. These investments drive a wide range of upgrades to reliability, coverage, speed, and overall performance for residents and businesses. They also improve critical services that support public safety and first responders. And we couldn't have done this without the 11,500 employees that work in this great state. They realize, as I hope you will, that ongoing advancements in wireless technology are a crucial piece of Florida's economic development puzzle. We'll go ahead to the next slide. In North Florida alone, we've invested nearly $300 million in our network between 2016 and 2018. We've got over 1,100 employees here in the region who are passionate members of our community. On the next slide, the priority for AT&T is keeping Americans connected at home and work. It's why our folks suit up for work every day, and why in the last 5 years, AT&T has invested more in the US than any other public company. Over $135 billion in both our wireless and wireline networks since 2015, which has resulted in our network covering more than 99% of Americans. The next slide. So our wireless network has evolved dramatically in the last few decades and has changed how people communicate forever and how we function as a society. These may look like steps, but some of these changes have transformed how we interact every day. Like when we started seeing mobile phones in the 80s, and then again with the introduction and mass adoption of the smartphone in the late 2000s. We believe that we're on the brink of another revolution with 5G, fifth generation technology. That's why making sure we bring you the best mobile network is a top priority. With increased speeds, past generations of network technology paved the way for the things we do today. We video chat, we live stream, we use ride sharing services and more. What started as bold new ideas became staples of our everyday lives. But 5G is much more than the possibility of a massive boost in speed. While certain 5G millimeter wave connected devices can download a full movie in a matter of seconds in the palm of your hand, the network also enables 5G connected devices to connect with each other in a near real time. This is what we call the Internet of Things, where the tools we use every day are smart and means many more devices are going to become online and connected. The 5G network is expected to handle up to 100 times more devices at once than previous generation networks. The mobile and internet-based technologies today are quickly changing how we keep our communities connected, enabling seamless connections that open the doors to opportunity and power the development of new innovations, partnerships, including 5G, autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence, and others. We'll go to the next slide. This is where we'll get a little technical for a second, and I'll try and go through this quickly as not to bore you, but it's important because it's really the baseline of how we all communicate and interact every day. Consumers demand internet access anytime, anywhere at the fastest speeds. So this is how we do it. We start with the wireless devices, which in order to operate, they need a network to connect to. This network is part radio-based, which is wireless, and part wired. It then relies on spectrums. Spectrums are the airwaves that connect over which wireless communications, calls, text, emails, traffic on the internet travel to and from devices via cell sites. That's when we get to number 3, which is the cell sites, or in that case, a macro cell site. These are the foundation of the capacity and wide-ranging coverage that consumers demand. They're the most fundamental building blocks needed to enable text, voice, high-speed internet, including 5G. They're effective for covering large swaths of land, operating on a lower spectrum. And then we move over to fiber optics. Fiber optics are the modern equivalent of copper wire, but instead of using electricity to transmit information, fiber uses pulses of light to transport internet-based data. Fiber optics support much more than data and transmit it faster than traditional copper lines. Some of you may have AT&T high-speed fiber in your homes and neighborhoods. Additionally, we have small cells, and we're going to talk a little bit about small cells shortly. But to keep up with the surging consumer demand we're going to see on the next slide, we have to optimize our network with technologies that enable more efficient use of the spectrum. One of the best paths forward is network densification, and that requires small cells. Think of them as a mini macro cell site. They support traditional cell towers, but operate differently because they bolster the capacity where it's most needed. They're low profile, compact, scalable, and unobtrusive facilities. They improve network performance by densifying the network, meaning data doesn't have to travel as far. Then we finally have the network. The network consists of all the facilities, wires, antennas, equipment, etc., and the spectrum we use to deliver data and content. This allows you to use your devices to communicate better and faster. Now, that was a bulk of tech talk, so I'll take a break there if there are any questions that pop up. Otherwise, we can move on to the next slide. All right, so on the next one, we're gonna just a really quick, easy graphic. With all the new ways we're connected and utilizing our devices, the demand on our network has never been greater. Data on our mobile network has grown more than 580,000% since 2007. We'll go to the next slide. Part of this data jump is also a result of the gig economy that 4G devices helped create. Think of companies that we use almost entirely to do business with on our phones: Uber, Postmates, Airbnb, Grubhub, Etsy, and others. Much like 4G introduced the world to that gig economy, we're confident that 5G will jumpstart the next wave of unforeseen innovation. AT&T was the first US company to introduce mobile 5G service, and we expect to have nationwide coverage later this year. Next slide. 5G technology will help us connect more devices faster with lower latency, increase battery life, and handle more data, things that are required for surging video growth on mobile networks. We believe the network of the future will be about the connected experience, not just faster speed. While speed's important for 5G, the true 5G promises much more. It'll be a network that makes a connected world and society possible. What's important to realize, it's not a brand new technology. It's not flash cut. 5G is going to be built on the existing robust LTE technology and infrastructure that has made the United States a global leader in technology and connectivity. 5G represents an evolution of technology, not an overhaul. This diagram shows the evolution along several key performance indicators. 5G is expected to deliver revolutionary enhancements such as ubiquitous gigabit connection speeds for faster downloads, dramatically decreased latency, which is to increase network responsiveness, and unrestricted density that will jumpstart the next wave of innovation. Latency, for those wondering, impacts things like the time between pressing play and seeing the video start, or hitting a web link and seeing a web page begin to load. An example of the importance in this jump in technology can be found in autonomous vehicles that need to communicate with each other instantly. So if a car is traveling on a highway and a car ahead of it brakes immediately, if they're automated vehicles, we can't rely on the existing network and infrastructure to make that communication. 5G is going to have the jump in speeds, the drop in latency that's going to require vehicles to tell each other to stop immediately with no drag in time. We'll go to the next slide unless we have any questions. So as you'll see here on the next slide,
we did have a couple of questions that came in. And one question that came in is, when will someone be able to own a 5G device?
Sure, great question. So actually, right now, you can go into any AT&T store and we have Samsung Galaxy devices that are 5G ready and capable. There's speculation that Apple will have 5G capable iPhones sometime in the fall. That's what we're hearing. So there are devices that are 5G capable today. Now, it depends on where you're at and using it to really experience some of those speeds. But yes, they certainly have devices that are already 5G capable. And once it becomes more spread around the US and major metropolitan areas, you're going to see iPhone, Samsung, you're going to see a lot more iterations of 5G capable devices.
Thank you. We also have another question that came in from John. He wanted to know that if there's been a change in the frequency with the COVID-19 and if it's affected service levels.
So I don't know about frequency. I would say maybe on the network. And I will say, yeah, we obviously, with people working from home and working and studying remotely, the network has seen a decent increase in usage. But I will say the network has responded great. You know, part of what we talked about earlier was the $300 million we've invested in North Florida, enhancing our network. And we like to think, you know, by making sure the network's as strong and dense as possible through a lot of these additions, through the addition of fiber in the area and things like that, we've had the capacity in almost all places where there's been a large network increase because of coronavirus and working from home. So thankfully, and knock on wood, the network's reacted positively to the increased usage.
Thank you, Kevin. That's all we have at this point.
Great. So I think on the next slide, we are going to talk a little bit about, sorry, one sec, just finding my place here. As you'll see here, mobile 5G is predicted to add $500 billion to the nation's GDP and create approximately 3 million new jobs. To create space for all these technologies that will be supported by 5G, we'll need to greatly enhance our mobile networks. Video traffic has increased over 75% in the last year alone and makes up for more than half of our mobile data traffic. In the age of Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Facebook, all of that, we really don't expect data usage on the network to slow down anytime soon. As a result of the upgrade to 5G, AT&T is also going to have the ability to bring innovative, intelligent solutions to make cities cleaner, safer, and stronger through smart cities technologies. We're going to quickly take a look, starting on the next slide, of a couple fields and industries where we're already beginning to see just how the start of 5G and that Internet of Things we discussed will change how businesses and industries work. So we'll go to the next one, and I think we have a video for you.
It's all about efficiency. Less water, less time in the field, less equipment, just efficiency to grow in zero grade. That's why we went there. It is checking that field every 7 minutes, 24 hours a day, no matter what's going on. It is monitoring that well and the water level in that field. It takes out all the human error. We have 5 fully automated rice fields with water level sensor. We saved 4.3 billion gallons of water last year alone.
The agriculture industry has already seen a big change in 5G and what some of the technology can bring for them. On the next slide, and this is an important one, is healthcare. And the video is a little long, so I want to kind of be conscious of everyone's time. But I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. Hospitals have a tremendous interest in 5G and the faster speeds and the lower latency that it will bring. Hospitals empowered with 5G are going to be able to download entire MRI scans within seconds. Virtual and augmented reality will be used for medical training, and low latency will enable remote surgeries, ensuring patients receive the best care no matter where they are. On the next slide, we're going to touch on manufacturing. We'll also skip this video, I think, but we've partnered with a company called Privas, just on the next slide, to create smart factory floors. This is technology that collects and relays performance data in real time, as well as provides predictive maintenance, which can reduce workplace injuries. On the next slide, also utilities, and this is the one that we see already occurring in major metropolitan areas. 5G technology is going to connect things like lighting, water, parking, energy grids, public transportation to the internet, saving cities money, preserving natural resources, and building better relationships with citizens. We're starting to see this in effect in a lot of cities, as I mentioned, where local and state agencies can use real-time information supported by 4G and 5G networks that communicate things such as street flooding during a storm to redirect traffic, emergency vehicles, and provide immediate information in real time to first responders. You know, when companies such as AT&T and others join together to solve modern challenges, cities can save taxpayer money, and that's important because then that money can be reinvested into the community and into initiatives such as new schools, parks, and important first responder services. So on the next slide, and do we have any questions right there? Should we take a break?
Hey, Kevin, this is Gloria. I see some questions coming in from a good friend of mine, John. He says, I live in a community serviced by coax, not fiber. Will 5G eventually allow me to bypass this service?
It's a great question. I think it depends on what you're looking to do with your devices. You know, there's folks that, you know, want to have that home fiber or internet option where if they are utilizing an Apple TV or a device like that or an AT&T TV device. But yeah, I think what we're certainly seeing, especially among younger generations that are deciding to cut the cord, cut the internet cord as well, because everything they can do is on their device. So they have an iPad, they have an iPhone, things that they can do entirely from their device. So 5G is going to give them the ability to have those speeds and to have that strong of a network to rely on to do things they were previously relying on, home-based internet and things like that. But you know, I wouldn't say we're there yet. And again, it's just a matter of personal preference. I think if you're someone who eventually has high-speed fiber as an internet option, if you want to have that flexibility, but also have 5G, you're going to be in a pretty good spot.
And then Charlie had a question. What is the time frame for deploying 5G to the rural areas? Sure,
that's a great question. So yeah, you know, where there's low there's a lower band of 5G, which is already kind of being spread around the state, and that's being supplemented on those macro towers that we discussed earlier. A good analogy to use is kind of like a chocolate chip cookie, where 5G network is live in a lot of many major metro markets now. But with that low band 5G footprint, think of that as the larger cookie, and then think of the ultra fast millimeter wave 5G, the thing that you can download a movie in 2 or 3 seconds on your phone, as kind of the chips in that cookie sprinkled around the country, kind of starting in downtown urban settings. So 5G is going to be widely available. It's going to be quicker than what you're used to experiencing on 4G. That includes rural areas. I would say we're still probably, depending on where you're referring to, a year away, maybe less. It just kind of depends on where you're at. But I know we do have rural areas here in North Florida that are already beginning to see some of the 5G speeds on that kind of lower frequency. For the ultra fast millimeter wave, that could be a little further off. It just kind of depends on how deployment goes. And in a minute, we'll get into some of that. A lot of it depends on permitting and working with local governments that are willing to take that investment on, or willing to allow us to make that investment in the community. Any other questions? Okay, so we'll go to the next slide if you guys can hear me. So what are some of the next steps? To make these advancements possible, we need to eliminate remaining barriers to small cell facility deployment and continue smart spectrum policies. We'll go to the next slide. And so this kind of goes into the 5G question and where we deploy and what the timeline looks like. So what factors go into deploying whether to deploy small cells? We look to see where we're having, first of all, network performance challenges, or where we may have them in the future that impact consumers. We use that data to help guide where we need to target the small cell solutions. Speed, cost, flexibility, scalability are all vital to determining if small cells are the right fit. To kind of jump back to that last question, we're going to begin replacing that technology that exists on the macro towers with 5G. Again, it's not going to be the millimeter wave, super fast, but it's going to be a considerable jump regardless of where we're currently at. Another factor is local zoning and permitting restrictions are always taken into account. Local officials and leaders can facilitate that deployment of small cells to bring their citizens enhanced network coverage and density by establishing streamlined permitting processes. On a side note here, one of my most important roles is working with both our network team, who identifies areas that need support via small cells, and local governments to agree upon locations for these sites to help support the network in a way that's unobtrusive for members of the community. We'll jump to the next slide here. So these are small cells. Some of you may have noticed them before. I will tell you, I had not recognized them out in the community. I was living in Orlando prior to joining AT&T about 2 years ago. And they're one of those things that once you see them, they become a little easier to spot out and about. So some of you may have, but they're flexible, targeted network solutions that cover a radius of 250 to 1,000 feet and can be readily deployed to specific locations. Places where customers are prone to connectivity issues, heavily populated areas that need more density, niche areas that can't effectively be served by a macro cell. It allows us to provide a better experience while also allowing us to prepare for the technology of the future, such as 5G. We'll go to the next slide. Again, the goal of small cells are to be low profile, compact, scalable, and unobtrusive. Depending on the need, they can be placed in buildings for interior use or outdoors. When outdoors, a preference of ours is to attach them to existing utility poles, light poles, or exterior walls of buildings. Like I said, no one wants a litany of poles sprinkled around town. The goal is to try and attach these facilities to existing infrastructure, so it's an unobtrusive way. We'll go to the next slide. So another thing I want to touch on is property values. That's something that comes up when we talk about small cells and talk about 5G. One of the fastest growing trends in wireless technology is how we're using it to manage our homes. Lights, personal assistants, refrigerators, climate controls. 72% of millennials are willing to pay $1,500 or more to make their homes smart. As these home apps and products become more popular, consumers demand connectivity. Small cells can help support consumers' surging network usage. Recent studies show that benefits from communities with small cells outweigh any aesthetic concerns, and 91% of those with smart homes would recommend it to others. I'll give a real-world example real quick that us here in St. Johns County can relate to. When Nocatee was first developed, there was a lot of pushback in the community over the addition of those macro cell towers. They're a couple hundred feet tall, but we obviously knew the area needed a network boost because there had been no residents there before. There was no need. There was no demand on the network there. Obviously, as some of you may have experienced, as I've experienced, visiting friends and family in Nocatee, our service, along with that of our competitors, is a little lackluster. So it's one of those things where we definitely understand on the forefront, people are worried about towers, small cells, things like that. But there was really no capacity there. And so we've been working closely with the developers the last year or two. We put a macro cell tower on air and live a few months ago down kind of near Palencia, which kind of reaches into the Nocatee area. And we're working on another site a little further north, which should significantly help coverage out there. Nocatee is probably the one place where I hear the most that we definitely need to enhance our service, and I know other providers hear the same. Any questions there before we move on? All right, so we will go to the next one.
Wait, Kevin, let me jump in 1 second. There was a couple of questions. A question was about the security, that someone was concerned that faster might be easier to steal data. And then Claire wanted to know about the cost differential to consumers.
Sure, as it relates. So I'll tackle the first one first. Actually, a benefit of the 5G technology, you're correct, obviously, it is a lot faster. But no, and I'm probably one of the lesser technical people in the company, but I will tell you, I know from a security standpoint, our internal folks cannot wait for the 5G deployment to become more common because in addition to that, part of the reason hospitals and governments are anxious for 5G service is it is known to be a lot more secure. On the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some issues relating to health concerns and where some of those rumors came from, and it kind of ties into that security question. But before I bounce back to that, the other question was cost differential. From what I've heard from, if you're referring to billing or the cost of the phones and devices, I can't speak to the billing question yet. We don't anticipate, at least nothing I've heard, is that it's going to be anything dramatically different from what we experience now cost-wise. I know Samsung, I know one of their new 5G phones coming out, they're expecting to be cheaper than whatever the latest iteration of the Galaxy was. So I think you're going to see it be a fairly competitive market, and I think the more competition there is, the better it's going to be for consumers. So on this next slide, something a lot of folks may have heard about is, what's the deal with 5G? What's the deal with small cells as it relates to health concerns and radio frequency? We want to set the record straight with facts that address some of the myths and misconceptions. We take everyone's health and safety seriously. It's why we want to acknowledge questions you've had. In December, the FCC, which is the federal agency responsible for regulating wireless carriers' radio frequency emissions, readopted conservative science-based RF exposure limits for carriers. The FCC noted the findings of the FDA, an expert health agency, that, quote, the weight of scientific evidence has not linked cell phones with any health problems. These limits apply to all wireless carriers and technologies, expressly including current 4G and 5G services and devices. AT&T wireless sites, including small cells and 5G, comply with these rigorous safety standards. RF frequency exposure to the general public at AT&T small cell sites is about 200 times below the FCC limits. Our customers are our family, friends, neighbors, and coworkers. Helping to keep them connected in a responsible way is our priority. So one thing, and we're going to tie into the security thing here with this, where do these rumors come from? We've seen them on blogs, we've seen them on Facebook, things like that. A pretty interesting 2019 New York Times investigative report concluded that the Russian news network RT America has been heavily involved in a campaign to derail 5G deployment in the US by linking 5G to adverse health effects, such as cancer, autism, and others. Domestically, existing anti-wireless activists and regulators have run with these foreign claims and questioned 5G safety. Simply put, the science doesn't support these claims. As the New York Times report makes clear, quote, plenty of careful science has scrutinized wireless technology for potential risks, and quote, the data contradicts the dire alarms. There's even conspiracies in the last few months that 5G somehow causes coronavirus. All of the misinformation is dangerous and has been refuted by our nation's top health officials. Why would Russia or China or any of our foreign adversaries care about this? Why would they spread this kind of information? What do they have to gain? Well, it goes back to that question about privacy. 5G, aside from being an economic impact boost for the United States compared to our competitors, it's also going to be a better way to protect our utilities, our water utilities, those things we talked about a couple slides ago. It's a lot more secure of a network. And so it is in their interest to have us slow our deployment, to kind of shoot ourselves in the foot. And so when they're able to effectively spread information like that, that could do something to slow down deployment, only they stand to benefit from it. So that's where a lot of it comes from. And again, the important thing is we've got 11,500 employees here in Florida, 1,100 on the First Coast. Our priority is delivering a network that's going to be safe and reliable for our employees, for their families, their neighbors, and our communities. It's not in our interest to put out a product or a service that in any way is going to be dangerous or harmful. Any questions there before we move on to the next one? All right. Next slide if we can. So there are several legislative efforts at the local, state, and federal levels of government to enhance our network, including supporting the deployment of further small cells and securing additional spectrum. Let's go to the next slide. In Florida, we've passed comprehensive small cell legislation that supports our effort to deploy small cells in the rights of way and in partnership with local governments and utilities. So we've reached agreements in Jacksonville Beach, St. Johns County. An important thing for deployment, like I mentioned earlier, is working with local governments and municipalities and doing so in a way that's respectful of the community. And the one thing I will definitely say is my experience dealing with the folks in St. Johns County should be the standard. They're great. They are willing to meet with our folks, our network folks, face to face, and we will literally go over maps where our coverage is weak, where we need improvements. And the folks at the county are very conscious of residential concerns and making sure we deploy small cells and things like that in an unobtrusive way. And they're very thorough and very great at kind of walking through and making sure our network can be satisfied and enhanced, but also in a way that's careful for the community, in a way that residents of St. Johns County can appreciate. So we'll go to the next slide. So Florida always has been and always will be an important part of our AT&T family. We're going to continue to make investments in these endeavors and build up our great state's economy. We want to be one of the first states to fully embrace autonomous vehicles, smart city solutions, things that are going to kind of kick our economy into the next generation. And so it's a priority for us to continue investing in Florida and North Florida. Jacksonville is a first to 5G market for us. It's been a target market for us. We're still working to really enhance our network and provide that downtown. I think as you look in Jacksonville for Lot J and Jaguar games and deployment of 5G, we want to be a city that when people visit, people say, wow, the First Coast is great. They come to a Jaguar game, they visit our downtown, they fly into JIA, they love it here, they love their experience, and then they come down and they buy houses and spend money in St. Johns County. I think that's a win-win for all of us. So we're proud to help lead this charge, and I'm open to any further questions we might have right now.
No more questions, Kevin. You're doing a great job.
Well, I think that's all I have for you guys today. If there's no more questions, though, we're excited. Like I said, I think the focus is going to be on major metropolitan areas for that 5G millimeter wave deployment here in the next couple months. But as it reaches outside those areas, it's going to be reliant upon, which counties, which local governments are open to the investment. And when we're welcomed with open arms and we have partners, and we certainly do have partners in St. Johns County, the quicker you're going to be able to experience it on your 5G ready devices. And we're really excited to bring that technology.
All right, fantastic. Well, Kevin, thank you so much. That was extremely enlightening because it's something that's going to affect all of us. So before we close today, we would like to again acknowledge and thank today's sponsor, Fields Auto Group. And we're also looking so forward to our business before hours. Yay, we get together again on July 8th at the magnificent TPC Clubhouse. And we will have our member appreciation event at Sawgrass Beach Club on July 23rd. So be on the lookout for that information because that's coming to you shortly. And today's discussion was recorded, and the recording and PowerPoints will be uploaded to the Chamber's website in the member resources area. Thanks again to everyone who attended the webinar. We appreciate you very much. Have a wonderful day.